this conversation has you thinking about your own training, we are building the HikeStrong app to help hikers train smarter. Whether it's for iconic destinations or the trails in your own backyard, you can learn more and get updates at HikeStrongApp.com. That's HikeStrongApp.com. Welcome back to the HikeStrong podcast. This is Marcus Shapiro. I am a hiking strength and conditioning coach. This is part 2 of my conversation with Blake. In this episode, we cover what changed between his first and second attempts on Mount Rainier, from cutting pack weight to adjusting his training with the stair climber work, rucking, and a more structured weekly progression. We also talk through the systems he refined at home, like layering, hydration, fueling, and efficient breaks, along with the technical skills that made a difference on the mountain. All of these pieces came together for his successful summit. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Blake. So pack weight, let's talk about that, the contrast between the two times.
Like we talked about, I went through piece by piece, and you said I'm a numbers guy. I'm an engineer, by profession. And my kids roll their eyes at me. I had my kitchen scale out and was measuring ounces, every piece of equipment that I was going to load, to see where I could cut, what I could refine without spending crazy amounts of money to buy, super fancy gear, and really refined what I needed to take, what I could leave behind, and cut that weight. I think that really did help me a lot in the second climb, where I felt as strong as I did getting up to Camp Muir. From Camp Muir, you can actually leave a lot of your equipment behind. So you're really only taking 10 pounds up to the summit and back. Your water, your extra layers, your snacks is really all you need on that second leg. So it really helped get up to Camp Muir. I will comment, I went with 2 friends, and one of them, it was his first time, and we figure everyone needs an inaugural first struggle to go through, and this was his turn. He was amazing, but we were comparing pack weights the morning before we left. I'm like, yeah, I'm about 30, 31. And he was like, man, I'm 40. I don't know what I can leave. And it ended up being an issue both times. So
you cut down to 31, and the first attempt, do you remember how much?
It was about 40. It was
about 40. Okay. Got it. All right. I'm glad you went into that about the trip. I want to hear about pack weight, how that was applied during your training in the first 12 weeks, and then transition and peak phase.
Okay. Yeah. So pack weight, I did through the transition period and the peak phase for attempt number 2. I made a much more conservative effort to do the rucking workouts on Saturday and to use pack weight when I was doing the stairs and the stair climber and the treadmill, all of them, right? So I will say that I was careful to do it much more gradually. I started with 10 pounds and then I worked up to 20 pounds rather than the first time around. I just straight to 30 pounds. Oh, okay, I got this. This is no problem. And I think that's part of what helped do some of the damage to the knee the first time around, or to keep it from healing as fast as it could have, I think is probably a better way to say that. But the second time I did ramp it up. And by the time I was done, I actually got a weighted vest, just because I felt it was really weird to go to the gym in a giant backpack full of dumbbells and blankets, right? So I did get a weighted vest that I would take to the gym, but when I'm here at the house, I'll wear the actual backpack that I'll be carrying up. I would wear that here on the treadmill, on the stairs, and during all my rucking workouts. I think that made a big difference. Honestly, one of the things that I really appreciate too is the fact that you have a mileage goal along with an elevation gain goal. Yes, elevation gain is the number one factor, but time on feet, the time you spend on your feet with a backpack on, I think also makes a huge difference. I noticed that with some of the other climbers that were on our climb the first time and the second time. Those who were, long-term backpackers who would carry heavy packs all over the place, they did much, much better than those who didn't.
Yeah. And interesting you bring that up. I don't talk so much about it because the total distance is 16 miles. It's a round trip. So it's 8 miles up. That's not really a long time. So really a lot of your time was spent on elevation gain versus trying to get distance.
Right.
But you make a good point. So yes, you have to have some kind of miles is part of the equation.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
I will make one comment on that though too, is that, when you're climbing up to Camp Muir, yeah, it's not that big a deal. It's about halfway. So you're 4.5 miles, something like that to Camp Muir. On day 2, you go all the way to the top and all the way back down to the bottom. That is a long walk. I mean, even on the flats, that's a long walk. And so that time on feet did play. I think we were almost 13 hours by the time we finished on day 3 coming down.
Didn't we do kind of a pyramid type training with pack weight in the transition at least, where you would kind of tier it? Like week 1 it'd be lower. Week 2, it'd be a little higher. Week 3, more intensity and higher pack weight. And then you'd come back down again and tear it back up again.
Yep.
So 3 weeks on, 4th week was more of a recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And so we worked that in, didn't we, to some degree?
Absolutely. Yep. And I've learned that from any other training program that I've done is it's usually 3 weeks of build, 1 week of recovery to let your body incorporate all that. And honestly, that's one of the things that said, okay, well, this guy knows what he's doing because he's incorporated these recovery weeks. You don't overtrain and hurt yourself. You give your body a chance to heal and integrate what you've done.
Let's talk about step ups because that actually wasn't a big part of your training plan.
Mm-mm.
I will say this is interesting. So on my website, I have a step up calculator. Okay. So we went over that. I want your thoughts, what you recall about it, and maybe why we didn't do as much step ups, but just hold for 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of clients that are doing it now. I've got a violin player that's doing it. I've got a trombone player doing it. I've got 2 other clients that these ladies who I ask ahead of time, do you have good rhythm, right? So the way the calculator works is you put in the step height and you put in the beats per minute and you put in how much time you've exercised and it'll tell you how much elevation gain that you climbed.
Mm-hmm.
But for it to work, you can use a metronome, which my musicians used, which is boring, but they didn't seem to care. But you can also go find a playlist. Let's say it's 120 beats per minute or whatever. You go on Spotify, find 120 beats per minute. There are lots of playlists for all different beats per minute. And so I'd introduced it right around the time that you were entering, I think, your transition phase. I really didn't have it on the website for very long. What do you recall about that? Was that a little bit tricky? Were we a little late on the step up game? Do you think you'll want to add more step ups next time? I don't know. Let's talk about step ups. So exciting.
Yeah. So during the base training, we'll call it, we didn't really even talk about step ups at all.
Mm-mm.
So
Nope.
that was not in the plan. It wasn't even some of the discussion given the issues. I think probably would
Here's
have
why.
avoided that anyway. Yeah.
Here's why though, because I didn't have a solid method to keep track of elevation gain. And I just had to kind of stick with the numbers. Okay. And I was really frustrated and I'm like, all right, I'm going to come up with a system where we could actually count for that. Otherwise, you got to literally count every time you go up and down and up and down and up and down. And you could do that. That's just crazy.
Right.
So anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just recalled that.
No, not at all. And so you introduced the step up. You showed me that calculator when it was first in its beta phase. And I actually went out to the garage and grabbed some scrap wood and built myself a 12-inch exact height step.
Right.
And I put a little frame on it with some little wedges so that I can get, kind of simulating walking uphill. I found the step training to be really helpful because there are plenty of times when you're out there climbing, whether it's just even on a hiking trail or if you're climbing the mountain, obviously, you're taking some pretty significant steps up, right? And you need that sort of deep, almost like a lunge to be able to do that. So, and the calculator I thought was really easy. I have a little app, another metronome type app. From what you were saying, you almost need to be a musician to do this well, right? You're a musician. I know that probably comes easy for you. I do a little bit of music, but not quite like that. But I have a little metronome app where you basically, every time there's a beat, you just hit the button. Boop, 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 boop. So I got into a rhythm and just kept hitting the button and let it tell me what my pace was. And then I just went off that. I just watched a show and just up and down. And for however long that was, I would calculate it that way, but really helpful.
Okay. Because I don't recall that on the chart. Did we track it on it? Did I remove rock workout and replace it with step ups?
No,
I don't think we did.
On the first chart, there was
it wasn't even there.
column. It wasn't even there. And I think you actually very kind. I think we ended up with 3 or 4 charts by the time I was done for round 2. There were at least a couple of charts, maybe 3 of them. And it showed up, I think, during the second to last or the last one. There's a new column specifically for steps.
Okay. All right. So next segment, I think will be interesting to the listeners here. We're looking at 2 paths here. Okay. There is Blake's path. Blake's path is let's just find the most difficult mountain in the contiguous United States. And what the heck? Let's just go ahead and climb it. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a mental thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what you did. And I think in the end, you thought that maybe failing was better than going through this kind of process that I'm about to mention was probably better. And in your case, I think that is probably true. So there is no right or wrong here. But for somebody listening, I think you could go to my episode 5. It was called Hiking to Mountaineering How To. And I talked with a gentleman named Karsten. Karsten laid out a clear step-by-step progression based on decades of guiding and instruction. And it starts with redefining what mountaineering actually is. So you move from being a hiker to being a mountaineer the moment the terrain demands new skills, when there's fall consequence, or when a rope becomes part of the system. So that's where hiking stops and mountaineering starts. Okay. And once you make that shift, Karsten suggests a simple progressive pathway that builds skill on top of skill. So he suggests in step 1, learn basic movement and snow skills. So you start with a mountain like Mount Washington. And the reason why he says Mount Washington is because he's one of the only IHMG, I forget what it's called. Anyway, it's like a certified mountain guide, a really rigorous process to get it. I think he's the only one out of several hundred in the United States that lives in the Southeast. So he uses Mount Washington as kind of training grounds. So basically he says, if you take a few days on the front end to learn a skill set like crampons, ice axe basics, steep snow, you can do Mount Washington in a long weekend. I think out west, you can do that with the company you went with. You could actually do it like a couple days before if you want. Okay. But what he said was, okay, so after that, then this step 2, apply those skills on a glaciated peak. The next step is going to Mount Baker. Okay. And it's a 3-day or a 4-day trip, and it gives you time to learn crevasse rescue and skills. So this is the first real glacier experience: rope travel, crevasse rescue systems, glacier navigation, and moving efficiently under load. He says Baker is the skills laboratory, quote unquote, where you practice everything you learned on Washington. Okay. And then in step 3, you attempt a major glaciated, mountain. So that's where Mount Rainier comes in. So it's probably the biggest mountain feeling in the US with the skill sets learned on the previous mountains, So anyway, that's what he says about Rainier. So Rainier combines altitude, crevasses, steep terrain, harsh weather, could be long days, and it's where you take everything you've learned and apply it under real pressure. So basically, to simplify it, hiking builds the engine. Mount Washington builds the skills. Mount Baker builds the competence. And Mount Rainier brings it all together. Anyway, listeners, take your pick. There really is no right or wrong. However you're built, you got to take one of those paths. And either way, you'll make it to the summit.
Yeah, let me make a comment on that. I think I jumped on Mount Rainier in complete ignorance. I was thinking it was another 14er and a place where I could go learn some new skills. What I didn't realize was that it was a little more than what I anticipated. In fact, when we came down, had to turn around after we didn't make it to the peak, the guides suggested, say, you know what, Blake, maybe you should try Mount Baker, right? Maybe do a little bit something easier first. And instead I said, okay, I'm just going to take all these lessons learned. I'm going to try it again. So I don't know. It's a personality thing perhaps, but they take all kinds of folks that have never climbed anything before up Mount Rainier. So they're used to that kind of thing. I think expect a learning curve. For sure.
Yeah. So it's not uncommon. They do have itineraries where you could do all this there. Instead of Mount Washington, you can do it there. And then you can leave and you can go practice and come back another time. Or you can just segue right into the climb. And in your case, you did it on the climb.
Yes. Yep.
Right. Okay. So this is what is titled Efficiency and Systems. So we want to talk about gear and equipment, breaks, packing, snacks, and fuel and hydration. So start with the refined gear setup. Let's roll.
All right. Which pieces should I go through first here?
Well, initially you talk about pack weight. We talked about going from 40 to 30 pounds, learning what to bring, what to leave behind. But you upgraded the pack.
Yeah.
Approach shoes, sleeping pads, sleeping bag, and more. So, anything you want to comment on that?
Yeah. I'm just probably start with the backpack itself. Right?
Yeah.
So
sure.
I had a backpack that I've, used forever on hikes. It's got lots of pockets all around it. And it actually did have a loop for your ice axe, which was important. And it's not a bad backpack, but it wasn't really purpose built. It was a little heavier than what it needed to be for the hike up there. So I started with, okay, I'm going to get a mountaineering specific backpack. I know they have the Hyperlights out there that are like 2 pounds and basically a tube, and it's like super light and very durable. Also really, really expensive. Some people have those. That's great. I got one that had a little bit more functionality, a little more feature to it, and found it to be really, really helpful by itself. So starting with the backpack itself, boots I have some boots that actually work really, really well. I didn't need to do anything with those. Yeah.
What, do you remember the name of the backpack and the model?
My backpack is a Black Diamond Mission 75.
Okay, perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so backpack, boots.
Boots, yep. So my boots, I have, I think Scarpa. I forget the actual model, but they're great mountaineering boots. It's the double layer. Come on, what do you call them? Insulated, plastic outside, double boot. Call it a double boot. So I have a Scarpa double boot is what it is.
Okay.
And those were great. What I did end up doing actually with the boots is the first time I came down, I struggled a little bit with, I think just because I was so exhausted, coming down that Muir snowfield, we were glissading down there. It was very slushy, very slippery, and I ended up on my rear end, I don't know how many times. It was exhausting. So the second time I was a little more deliberate. I ended up banging up my toes. So on the way down, I did get some nasty blisters. I didn't lose toenails, but I was close, right? Kind of thing. So the second time I upgraded my socks, and I also went out in the winter and practiced glissading. Right? So in the winter here in Kansas City, I was out at the park going down the hill practicing. And so the second time down, I did much, much better and my feet fared a lot better. So there was a kind of a boot upgrade and socks. Socks are so important. And the other thing with all this gear, I had to go, and maybe I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but I went and as I ordered the gear, and when it was winter here in Kansas City, I tested all of it, right? So I would go out in different combinations of socks inside the boots, go up and down for an hour at the park and figure out, okay, which ones treat my feet better, which one in which pairs of socks, what combinations work the best for me. So I did that, tested all my gloves. I did upgrade some gloves as well. My lightweight gloves were just like work gloves for the garage. They got, they weren't great. They got wet. And so I got some waterproof versions of those. That was really helpful. I'm trying to think what other gear. Socks.
Go back to socks for a moment.
Yes.
Everybody loves to talk socks.
Yes.
They want to know what the secret socks are. Well, everybody's different. Can you recall what your system was? The brands, whether you did 2 layers, 1 layer?
The Darn Tough socks.
Okay.
The wool ones there. So I have a pair of the heavy ones that go all the way up my calf because I don't want my boot to cut off on the boot height ones. And then I have a version of the thin ones that sit underneath it. That is the perfect combination for me. It's plenty warm and no blisters.
Was the thin one like a smart wool kind of?
No, was it wool? The Darn Tough thin ones as well. They are wool. I did try versions of like sock liners, silk liners or other liners, and just found they bunched up. They did not work for me.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right. Okay. So do you want to talk at all about sleeping pad, sleeping bag? Anything else that's interesting and might be?
I did upgrade my sleeping pad as well to something that only weighs a pound. It was very comfortable when I wasn't rolling off it. I'm not sure I love it yet, but I slept very warm and relatively comfortable there.
Inflatable, I guess, for the under a pound. Inflatable.
So up there, since it's a supported camp, they have I think they call closed cell pads up there. It piles of them up there. So you just grab those. You don't have to haul them up. You probably get away with not bringing any pad at all, but it was nice to kind of put mine on top of the other ones that were there. I also brought a warmer sleeping bag the second time around. I did get cold the first time. So I have a lighter down sleeping bag instead of the other synthetic one that I had brought up the first time. That was super helpful.
What did you leave behind the second time?
Cell phone battery pack. I was dead set on bringing that thing up there so I could charge my watch overnight. I have an Apple Watch and I wanted to charge it. So I brought that thing up there and that was an extra pound. It was very much bigger than it needed to be. So I actually got a much smaller one. I did bring it, a much smaller one, but I also upgraded my watch actually because the Apple Watch doesn't hold a charge for long enough for me to be able to use it. I ended up getting a Garmin watch that has a nice long battery life on it.
All right, let's talk about layers.
Yes.
So you have this quote, be bold, start cold. I guess that's just conventional wisdom. Talk about how you kind of figured that out. You went out in the cold, you tried different layers. Talk to us about that.
I did. So my first attempt, one of the things that I ended up doing is I had that mantra in my head, be bold, start cold, right? Because you warm up as you go and sweat is bad. So it's all about sweat management. So for that first hour of climbing, once you warm up and start sweating, if you sweat and then you get to your first break, you will be cold, right? So I was like, okay, this is cold enough. I had a nice, quarter zip that was fleece and thought that that was sufficiently cold to go that would keep me warm enough. It was too warm. I did sweat. And when we got up to the very top of the first ridge, the wind was howling across the top of it. It's, 1:30 in the morning, and I got cold and I shivered. So second time around, I took it more seriously. I ended up getting a thinner wool half zip, and that was much, much better. So that when I got to the top, it was not as jarring to do this. So I did upgrade some of the layers too.
Okay.
At least that one I did.
Let's talk about breaks. Kind of what you learned about breaks and eating and drinking, applying sunscreen, lip balm without wasting time. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So I learned the first time that break efficiency is so important because the cadence is you hike for about an hour, you take a break for about 15 minutes, you hike for another hour. That's the cadence. And during that break, especially when, it's the middle of the night and it's cold and the wind is blowing, you've got to very efficiently put on extra layers because when you're stopped, you will get cold. So you put on your big parka, you have to take your gloves off, put them back on again. You have to get your drink, and then you sit down and actually rest your body for that time while you fuel and while you hydrate. There were several mistakes that I made on the first attempt, which included hydration. Well, I'm talking about breaks. I won't get too distracted there. So one of the things that I did the second time that I didn't do the first time is I actually practiced my breaks. I learned that that's important, right? So I loaded up my pack with everything that I was going to need on the actual summit day. And I practiced and timed myself taking off my gloves, putting them somewhere where they're not going to blow away or fall off and slide down the mountain without being attached to anything while I had them off, putting my parka on, learning to put your snacks in your parka so that you don't have to dig them out of your bag, for example, and then sitting down and taking a drink. So learning how to do that, learning how to pack my bag more efficiently, right? So during the breaks, one of the guides had a great idea. He calls it the octopus method, right? Where he says, okay, have a designated spot in your pack for each of the layers that you have, for your parka, for your hard shell, for, your puffy, and for, whichever. Have them in a designated spot. This one's on the left. This, you just go by the clock. And you shove it down in there, and then you hang one sleeve out the top. So when you're done, you have sleeves out the top. You just put them all in. That way you can easily see which layer you need to grab. You can pull it out in a hurry, put it on in a hurry, sit down, eat, drink, and rest.
Okay. So let's talk about the trail mix. Peanut M&Ms, Cliff Bars, Uncrustables. Mm-hmm. Give us a rundown.
Yeah, I've been learning a lot more about nutrition while you're moving, while you're climbing like that. And I had brought, the first time I was like, oh, the guides were telling us, bring more food. You have to have this certain pounds of food, right? I'm like, oh, I don't have that much. So I bought this great big protein bar, and it's not one that I eat very often, and it did not sit well. So I learned that eating and snacks are something you need to practice during your training. So while I was out rucking, I would bring the snacks that I was going to eat on the mountain. I would practice my breaks, sit down, eat them. And I learned that my body loves, and I love them anyway. Peanut M&Ms are awesome. Regular old trail mix. First time I was up, I had these little meat sticks that were super spicy. I had zero appetite for those. I did not eat them. They weren't great. Those little Uncrustable peanut butter sandwiches are amazing. The guys and everybody would bring leftover pizza and fruit snacks and things like that. So I think learning and practicing the food intake was great. I might take this time to mention too that when you're up there, it's hard. All your M&Ms are frozen. So you have to defrost them in your mouth before you can actually chew them if you don't want to break your teeth. So I learned that, I need more calories and I need to hydrate. And so I found a drink mix that gives you not only electrolytes and amino acids, but also calories, right? Is that Goo Roctane you recommended. It was fantastic. That was a way that I could get calories both by drinking and by eating. And that, I think, helped fuel my climb up to the top as well.
Okay. All right. That makes sense. Let's talk about filling your bottles with warm, hot water, storing them in your sleeping bag. Yeah, let's go into that.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, the first time that I attempted, I got cold at night, at least when we were in the tent. When we were in the tent, I got a little chilled. I couldn't warm up. My toes get cold. And I learned a few tricks. One of the things that I did at that very first break on summit day, on the first attempt, is we had filled our water bottles full of water per the guide's recommendation. Okay, fill your water bottles up. That's great. And then you sit them next to your sleeping bag on the ice in your tent, right? Just a very thin layer between the bottom fabric of your tent and you're sleeping on a glacier. And so your water is nice and chilled in the morning and ice cold. Get up to the first break after sweating. And so I was cold because the wind was blowing. And the first thing I do is take a long swig of ice water. That did not help me at all. And I could not stop shivering, to be honest with you. And I think that really just was unnecessary draining of energy. So the second time around, I learned the trick of, put some warm water in those bottles and shove them in the bottom of your sleeping bag. It keeps your toes warm. It keeps your water from getting overly cold. It keeps you from freezing. And it was fantastic. And then that way, when you get up to that very first break, actually before you leave, they have hot water there for hot drinks that you're supposed to, drink before you go start hiking. I drunk half of that Nalgene, and then I put hot water in the rest of it. So that when you get up to that first break, you're actually drinking warm water and you can, it helps you regulate your temperature better.
Excellent. My friend, I think we covered everything.
Are we running out of time?
Is there anything that you think the listeners need to hear?
We didn't talk about the rest step.
Okay. Yeah. Let's talk about it. Yeah. And people could look it up, but I know that was important to you. Go ahead.
It was. So one of the things that they taught us, like you just regulating your pace, you don't want to get your heart rate up too fast. And one of the ways that you do that as you're climbing, they will teach you what's called the rest step. That means when you're climbing up a hill, basically kick your top foot forward and you leave your weight on your back foot for half a heartbeat and you basically rest. So you're taking a little teeny rest every step. The first time when I thought, okay, well, I know how to do this, kick my foot up there. But what I didn't do, and this is such a subtle difference, is I thought I had it, but learning that subtle difference between leaving all your weight on that back foot and lazily throwing your top foot up where it needs to go and resting for that half a heartbeat. When I finally figured out how to leave all my weight, don't lean forward on that front foot at all. That made a huge difference in helping me conserve energy. That was an interesting distinction between, at least to me, between the first attempt and the second attempt.
Okay, good. I'm glad we didn't gloss over on that. What else? Anything else come to mind? This is it. Blake, pressure's on, buddy. What else?
What else did we do?
We covered a lot, man.
Efficiency.
We did good.
Hydration. One last thing on hydration is that, and again, per your recommendation, I'm not sure that I hydrated well enough before summit day. And I've learned, we talked about that shortness of breath, and I think there may have been some of, I think it's called exercise-induced bronchospasm, right? Which is, some people call that exercise-induced asthma. It's not asthma. Asthma is a chronic thing. This is just more of a situational thing. But it's made worse by, obviously, exercise, because it's a lot of breathing, but dry air, cold air, and dehydration. All those three things make it worse. And I think I combined all that together. That's part of what contributed to some of that shortness of breath. I think in part of it, Mark's a lot of water before we started out on that first leg of summit day. So you said, Blake, it's recommended that you drink at least 16 ounces before you start any significant exercise. I'm like, okay, Marcus says 16 ounces, that's half an Nalgene. So I made sure to get that in before we started. And again, I think that made a huge difference on the second round. So talk about hydration.
Amen. All right.
Sleep. I'm going to talk about sleep.
Do it.
I guess I did talk about it already a little bit, but I understand at this point, sleep is so, so important while you're training, while you're leading up to your training, and while you're climbing, as much as you can get sleep. So that melatonin helped, trying to calm yourself there. Sleeping ahead of time makes it a huge, huge difference for me. I had one more thing, Marcus. I'll let you go just yet.
No, that's fine. Well, you think of that. People talk about sleep, and that's what all these wearables are. Like, I don't have an Oura Ring, but I was using Morpheus. I've used that on and off. But yeah, sleep is a critical aspect to recovery and HRV scores. And I'm not going to get into all that now. People can look up HRV. Again, Oura Ring. All these companies have different algorithms. Garmin does. Whoop has it. Yes, sleep is, I think, a critical part of their algorithm. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. I thought of the one more thing, and this didn't make it onto our list here. Well, I was catching up on some of your older podcasts, and I was really, really inspired by the one that you had with Tia Banks. right? And she talked a lot about having a positive mantra, something that you have running through your head while you're climbing up when things get hard. And without having that information, I started doing that on that second climb. And there were segments of it, especially as we were getting toward the top. I was huffing and puffing and it was hard. I won't say any of it was easy, but I had a mantra. You're going to laugh. I'm going to tell you what it was, right? Is I am good enough. I am strong enough, right? And that was my mantra. All I needed there was, and gosh darn it, people like you, right?
Yeah. Saturday Night Live, right?
Saturday Night Live, yep. I need to find a cooler one than that.
No, that's cool.
But I will say that positive mantra, that positive self-talk had a huge impact on helping me just muscle through the tough parts and just keep putting one foot in front of the other and having the confidence that, you know what, I trained enough for this. I've got all the tools in my bag. I've got all the right skills at this point. I've practiced them enough. I just need to execute. And it worked. It was fantastic. And it was so satisfying to be up on the top of the peak there and to see the steam coming out of the vents around the top of the bowl. I hugged my guide. Whether he liked that or not, I don't know. But I felt that great being up there. It was one of the most satisfying things that I think I've ever done. One of the hardest things I've ever done. And I'm excited to go try and do something like that again.
Excellent. That's a good place to wrap up.
Yeah.
Well, look, like I said, I'm so grateful you gave me the opportunity to work with you. We made a really good team. I think we crafted a fabulous podcast together with all of our teamwork and skills that we've learned and matured, together over time. So
this is a team effort. That's another thing that I've learned. I feel like I'm growing up, age 54. I'm learning all kinds of new things. It is absolutely a team effort to be able to do. Maybe there's solo people that can do all this on their own. I don't know, but I could certainly not have done this without your help, Marcus. And I am so appreciative of all of your help and your guidance and your wisdom in helping me get up there and go live. I heard a saying that I heard yesterday. I love it. So I'm mid 50s. People don't slow down because they get old. They get old because they slow down. And I refuse. I am a grandpa now. I don't want to get old. This is my way of cheating time. I don't know how long that's going to work. I'm going to do it as long as it will be. So I can do it.
Okay. Perfect. All right. We're wrapping up there. All right, my friend. It was great to see you. We're going to stay in touch. We'll figure out tomorrow.
Yep.
And that's it, man. Hope everybody enjoyed this. This was pretty rich. I think it's going to be 2 parts for sure. All right, my friend.
Thank you.
You take care. Great to see you, buddy.
And we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Bye. And by the way, make sure you stick around to the very end, not just the very end, but the very, very end, where Blake and I have a additional conversation. When the cameras go off, the conversation always shifts with a little different tone. So I hope you enjoy it. That concludes this episode of the HikeStrong podcast. I'm committed to keeping all of the episodes for free. All I ask is that you subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. And don't forget to share this podcast with your friends. My goal is to build a vast community of hikers with the confidence to crush any local or global trail. I hope you will join me in this endeavor. So until next time, train, hike, repeat, and as always, I'm here to support you every step of the way. All right, man. We crushed that one. That was awesome.
Hopefully that's helpful and useful. I don't know.
Yeah, I've done this enough times. That was helpful. Trust me.
I listened to all of your other guests, and I'll be honest, I'm feeling out of my league because they're pretty amazing people. So I'm like, well, hopefully this is okay.
No, this was awesome. It was just as rich. No, it was awesome. And the structure really helped. So do you want to put together now? You want to pick a time? Sure. And I'm not going to. All right, I'm done.
Yeah, Leighton needs a different headlamp.
Is he home?
Yeah, he scared the living daylights out of me.
Okay.
So you got to go.
Somehow.
Yeah. So why don't we do this?
Totally fine.
Let's just email real quick. You email me with some days and times, and then I'll reply right back. Okay.
No problem.
So keep your stuff up. Okay.
How long do I keep it up?
Oh, you'll see it probably for like just a few minutes. It may even upload right away.
Do I turn it off when it hits 100?
Yeah, you can just close your computer, turn it off, whatever you want to do.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks,
all right, my friend. Good to see you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.